Hey everyone, it's great to be here at Strata. Since Lee and Pinterest did this inspiring talk, I thought I'd be more grumpy and do a grumpy talk. So we'll just kind of focus on grumpiness here. And I wanted to start with kind of taking a step back and take what I say here with some grain of salt, right? But up until 10 years or so ago, if you work with data, you really had two options that were widely used. You had screwdrivers, and you had hammers. And since I used to work in SQL Server, I was in the hammer business, and the hammer was the relational database. And the other thing was the file system. And this was, if you had data, you put it in one of these two. You never put it in anything else, at least not in any kind of large use. And it gets very interesting in like why this happened. And what happens with it. One of the favorite, I think, examples for me when we used to do, talk to customers, SharePoint was a common kind of complaint. Hey, I looked inside the SharePoint database that you put in SQL Server. Why does it look like shit? I was like, no, it's not shit. It's just, it's different. And why is it different? Well, because we had to use a hammer to cut down a tree, right? And why did you use the hammer to cut down the tree? Well, it turns out if you're building a system and you're running the system yourself, especially on your own infrastructure, and if you, like us, sell software, or used to sell software, then you worry about the complexity of your system, right? You don't want a gazillion stuff in there. You just want, okay, I put the data here, I make sure this thing is alive, I take backups over here. I can't use kind of the right tool for the job. Because then, if SharePoint used the right tool for the job, maybe you had to run, 10 servers just to run some simple collaboration thing. Okay. So then what happened was the cloud came along, right? And fueled by open source software. And all of a sudden, we had kind of three key things. We had reliable infrastructure. So anyone can now say, give me a VM, and it runs. And it won't just disappear on you. Okay? And all of a sudden, we had the democratized extreme scale. So if I had a problem in the old days, you had to focus on making sure that the software could figure out the problem fast enough for you. You couldn't rely simply on extreme compute scale. All of a sudden, in the cloud, you can. And using the term or you loosely here, of course, there are certain companies, organizations that have access to extreme scale and had for a long, long time. But for most of us, it just wasn't the case. And finally, you start seeing services rather than software, right? You don't have to install and run the relational database for you or the NoSQL thing or the big data thing. You can just rent it as a service. And now, all of a sudden, you can use the right tool for the job, which creates a new problem. And this is one of my favorite pictures from this analyst 451 Research. They have this subway map of the database world. And you can see they cover kind of NoSQL, relational, everything. And if you look at this, okay, now there's some to choose from here. And you get into these kind of dangerous conversations also with cross big data, NoSQL, and relational, with statements like, you can't use a relational database for foo, right? Or you can't use Hadoop or Spark for this thing. Or you can't use NoSQL for this thing. Which is, rarely the case, right? Because no relational database is exactly the same as another relational database. So you have to have a much more nuanced conversation, right? You have to say, well, okay, can so-and-so tool help me with this? And whether or not it's a NoSQL tool or a relational tool may actually be less important. So we have to go and all of a sudden spend more time understanding what exactly can the tool do, because you used to have very few options, right? So how do you pick the right tool? And there's basically two, simplified two paths here. One is, and this is very common, dogmatic standardization. I'm going to put the chair here, I'm going to point my hose that way, and I'm just going to go do that. And if you do this, some of the times you're going to put out the fire and it's going to be great. but some of the times it's not going to work very well. But this is a reaction to, I have so much choice. I'm just going to simplify. We're just going to put everything in HDFS. Everything. Doesn't matter. Everything goes there. Or everything goes in SQL Server. And neither choice is obviously good. And here it's super important for us to always strive to take a principled approach instead. Okay, so what is the actual problem that I need to solve here? What is it that we actually need to accomplish? And what are the actual priorities? And given this plethora of choice, it gets more and more complex. So it gets more and more important to actually spend the time to pick the right tool for the job. And to balance, like, probably I can't have, use all of the tools. I don't have familiarity with all of the tools. I don't have expertise. But I also can't just restrict myself because I'm going to have absolutely best people that know this and only know this, and they're super expert in that. You're likely not going to produce great results with this. So from a perspective of requirements, I kind of like this as a starting point around value. So there is some sort of value spectrum for your data, okay? And it goes across, obviously, high value. And the other side of the spectrum is unknown value. Because I don't really know if it's valuable or not yet, which is obviously where we see the explosion of data today, is on the unknown value section. It's a good example for us. For example, we run the Azure Data Services. So we get a ton of telemetry in, right? Like what is happening in the service. And a lot of this telemetry is unknown value to us. I don't know what to do with it. But maybe in the future it becomes important. And some of the data is highly valuable. And simple definition of valuable and not valuable or unknown value is basically actionability. So unknown value is basically not actionable. And high value is highly actionable. So someone puts an order into a system, it's very actionable. I need to just procure that thing, deliver it to customer, procure payment, right? Versus so-and-so device emitted a ton of stuff that we put over here, not sure what to do with it. And you have to have an answer. So for example, on the requirement side, unknown value, you will be very focused on cost. Because you probably need to store a lot. And on the high value side, you may have much more requirements around latency. I need to be able to send some ad hoc query in, and I need a response within milliseconds, microseconds, whatever it may be. So I like to say unknown value data is store a lot, use a little, okay? And high value data is store a little, use a lot, okay? And it sounds like an oversimplification, but it is actually a very useful starting point. And then treat each thing as a separate spectrum to figure out what are the actual requirements that you have. So in terms of what to do here, it's fairly simple. So start with your requirements and really prioritize. Prioritization is where I see most customers get into trouble because you prioritize things incorrectly. You have to focus on what is really important for the business here. What is really high value data? What is really unknown value? What does the value imply? So start with your requirements. And then don't forget to try. It sounds also like this stupid recommendation, of course. But many people actually don't try enough. Oh, someone else already tried this, it failed. Oh. So what did they do wrong, right? So go and actually try. And it's not that hard. Like try the most important things. Just simple POC. Oh, okay, this makes sense. Let's go forward. And then, very dangerous, don't get too attached to standardization. So standardization is obviously good. We know these are the 10 tools or 5 tools, whatever it is, that we've decided to use. We have expertise. We know how to manage. We know how to use them. But don't fall into the trap of getting dogmatic there, which is a very, very common thing you'll see over and over again. And we have to stand up against this and say, no, let's take a step back and let's understand the problem. So let's go forward, embrace the choice. Let's not go backwards. Thank you.